This program is presented by University of California Television. Like what you learn? Visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the latest UCTV programs.
Fantastic. Congratulations on such a wonderful and important film. It's already won, I mean, it's certainly been in the running for dozens of film festival awards, and I can't imagine how much time and effort this film took. How many years was it in the making?
It was a little over 2 years.
2 years long. So before we get too deep into the film, I wanted to ask you about your backstory. I gather that you are actually a designer, a graphic designer. And this is actually your first film.
My first feature.
First feature. So tell us a bit about the process of your early career in design and graphic design and moving into commercials and then moving into a documentary like this.
So I started my career as a designer, and I worked primarily in motion, so motion design, and doing mostly graphics. And then I transitioned into directing commercials, so a lot of car commercials, mostly car commercials, other commercials too, tea commercials, beer commercials, so a lot of commercials.
Sapporo beer.
Sapporo beer, yes. So I started my career as a designer, and then I went into directing. But I've always kept design, I still design, and that's kind of how I transitioned to this point.
And you're actually you're an employee at Imaginary
Forces.
Imaginary Forces. So tell us a bit about their involvement in this film.
So they produced it, and they let me direct it there. So all the production happened, the editorial happened there, all the graphics were done there, with a team, as you saw in the credits, a huge team of people. So we produced the film.
So you're actually an Emmy nominated director for the opening sequences of Boardwalk Empire and Band of Brothers, right?
Band of Brothers, and 2 for this year, Jessica Jones and Final, and also Magic City.
And so film title sequences is actually one of your specialties.
Yeah, so that's how our company got their start. I mean, it was formed, I think, in 1995 or something like that, and we got started doing a title called Seven. I don't know. It's an old movie from a while ago.
I remember Seven with Brad Pitt.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we started, and people started to recognize us for that work. But obviously, we do a lot of other. I mean, it's only like 10% of our business, but we love to do them. So,
what does that look like? Is there similar pre-production involved with the creation of a title sequence? I mean, there's some storytelling that is actually revealed in these title sequences.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that creative process. Yeah.
So when we work on film titles, generally we work with the creator or the showrunner, and he or she has a vision of what they want to emphasize, whether it's a backstory or they just want to create a mood, or they want to, tell a piece of the story or what have you.
Sure.
So what we do is we talk to them, and then we come back to them with boards. So sometimes they're very free, and they say, well, just do whatever you want. Like in the case of Jessica Jones, Melissa Rosenberg, who's the creator, she was like, I just want you to know what the story's about, and then just come to me with what you think is appropriate for it. So it's a little bit different than filmmaking, because you are kind of the client.
Right, right.
In this case, we have a client. But I think the process is very similar in the sense that, when I created the film, we always think of the user, right, or the person that's going to be looking at this piece, right? And so it's a very intimate process, right? Because we're trying to figure out how they're going to view it, how through time and how things are going to unveil themselves. So it's a very similar process in that sense. And we have to come up with the overall vision for the film or for a main title. So it's similar in that way.
Interesting, interesting. Let's jump into the film. So we had a great discussion over dinner prior to coming up here, and Discovery Channel. This film aired on Discovery in May.
That's right.
But it wasn't a commission. This was not a commissioned film by Discovery, or even a co-production. This was actually an acquisition,
Yes.
which is quite rare. Tell us a little bit about before Discovery Channel. How did the story for this film? Where did it initiate, and how did it build to eventually be bought by Discovery Channel?
Well, so the story that Daniel told me, the co-director on this film, he said that they have a lot of people that are part of NRDC, people that really believe in their cause. One of them being Robert Redford, and he told me the story that Robert Redford said to them, "You guys have so many amazing stories." But no one can tell them better than yourselves, because you guys know them very well.
Right.
And in this case, two of the characters here that you saw, Joel Reynolds and Michael Jasny, that's been their life's work, is to really, work, really fighting the Navy in courts to get these legislations made.
These are the lawyers from NRDC.
That's right. And so that's really the reason why this film was made, is because these stories were so important, and it was their life's work, and they had contact to all these different amazing scientists and researchers.
So it really came out of NRDC.
That's right.
Which is interesting, to have a nonprofit putting a huge amount of money towards a documentary film.
Yeah.
So what about, so Imaginary Forces is clearly a co-producer, and then Diamond Docs, you mentioned, they're also involved. What was their role?
Yeah, so Diamond Docs is actually Mark Monroe, and he's a writer, and he's written for The Cove. He wrote for Sonic Highways, for Racing Extinction, just to name a few. I mean, he's like the documentary writer that if you want to do a good documentary, you get him.
Really?
Get him involved.
Great writing in this film.
Amazing.
And IFAW, International Fund for Animal Welfare,
That's right.
animal welfare. So they are also a partner and a funder?
Yes.
Okay.
So they work closely with NRDC, and they have a lot of similar missions. As you saw, Katie Moore, she is also somebody in the film. So we worked with them as well to create the film.
Very cool. Are you able to tell us what the budget was?
To be honest, I forgot.
You're not sure? Really?
I just worry about the creative.
Yeah,
the producers worry about the money.
As you should. I loved the line. I just have to say that there's a line in the film from Chris Clark that the ears are the opening to the soul of the whale. I mean, there's so many poignant moments that you capture in this film. You mentioned that in an interview that you didn't want to overuse beautiful shots of whales in the film. That it was kind of like a museum filled with beautiful paintings. We didn't want to inundate our audience, so we held back. Yeah. Talk a little bit about holding back beautiful images of whales. How did that contribute to the audience's enjoyment?
Yeah, well, initially when we first started this process, my editor, Christopher Johnson, he has worked on a lot of documentaries before. And he had these very wide vistas of oceans and, whale after whale after whale.
Right.
And I always, I think of design in the same way, that like when you go to a museum and you see 100 beautiful paintings, like you leave satiated, but you don't remember any of them because there's so many beautiful paintings there. So I said to him, we need to hold back and pick our moments of when we have them. Actually, he snuck more in than I wanted.
I noticed in this cut there's a couple more
This cut
in.
there's a little more. So that's my philosophy. I think, in design we say less is more.
Less is more.
And I think it's true in filmmaking, right? It's like
Sure.
you have to make those moments poignant enough so that people really pay attention to them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's lots of animation in this film, lots of graphic pieces.
My background.
Yeah, so that's clearly right up your path. So we use you have said that we use graphics to help our audience visually understand complex ideas. So let's talk a little bit more about how you make the decision of when to use graphics or animation as opposed to live action filming. I mean, sometimes you just fundamentally can't shoot something like
Right.
those beautiful patterns of the ships crossing the oceans and
Right.
the exploding circles from the seismic. But how do you make that decision of when you're going to use animation as opposed to live action?
Well, on the onset of doing this film, I really felt that bringing in a younger generation to view this film was really important. Like, I think my generation is probably the one that caused all the problems. So I think it's the younger generation, and well, hopefully we will help them too to help solve these problems. And so I know that their viewing habits are very different than someone like me. Luckily, I have a lot of millennials that work with me, so I would bring them in the edit room, and when I started to see them doze off, we would, try to fix that.
Sure.
And I think, things move faster now. I mean, even if you look at old movies, right? The way you remember them in your head versus watching them now is very different, right? Sometimes you can't sit through an old movie anymore because we're so used to things moving so quickly.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of it. I wanted to keep the attention going. And then also, again, like you said, some complex problems are not easily understood. And so sometimes graphics helps tell those stories in a very engaging way. We always say that we want to make the complex simple. And I also think that if you understand the problems, that it's easy to repeat them, and so it becomes viral in a way, and so that we can help fix the problem sooner if people are talking about it. I mean, I think that's the whole message of this movie. It's like no one knows about it because it's an invisible problem. So if we make that visible, the problem visible, then people will start to help change. Thank you.
I was curious as to the decision to, limit the number of scenes portraying whales in their habitat, but conversely, the inclusion of various stills and scenes of rather traumatic visual imagery. We see some rather morbid scenes during the film, and I'm just wondering, how do you decide what's appropriate to include, to connect with a particular audience? When we see, I think, on the television or on any screen, sort of graphic images, we tend to have a more visceral response. And so I'm wondering, how do you decide that those should be included as opposed to more images of presumably healthy whales in their natural habitat?
I mean, I think we actually really held back on some of the gruesome images. There were some that I fought to keep in there. I thought they were important. I don't think that showing gruesome images necessarily evokes an emotion. I mean, it does evoke an emotion, but I don't think it's always good to have it in there. But I think in this case, because it worked with the story, I thought it was appropriate. I think they're quite shocking, right? The one with the orcas that is you don't forget those images, and I think I think it worked for the story. Again, it's the same thing about having too many beautiful animals. You don't want too many dead animals. I mean, and this problem really we show about the beachings, right? A lot of beachings, which is kind of the thing that gets the attention of people. But really, they call it like a death by 1,000 cuts, right? The shipping where it's like that constant noise, right? You don't see beached animals from that, but they start to, not be able to find a mate, and they can't find their food, and they get skinny, and there's been some documentations of that. So the NRDC actually made me hold back on those gruesome images a little bit more than maybe I wanted, but I don't know if it was too shocking to you, hopefully not.
I appreciated the film too a great deal, and was particularly happy that there was at least a small section of the approximate hour devoted to ideas about possible solutions. Thank you for that. Not all documentaries include that, but I was glad to see yours. And I could have stood a few more graphic images of dying animals, because it would help reinforce the idea that the artwork and the animation gave us of how extensive this whole thing was. I mean, the most dramatic moment in the film for me was when you showed the overlay of a shipping, I don't know if it was container ships or what, but anyway, of industrial shipping and the orcas sounds, the communication they were doing. In this channel, Santa Barbara channel, you may or may not be aware, and Mr. Henron, I think, is aware of the fact that we have tried an experiment using the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary as a basis to form a cooperative approach with some air pollution control districts in Ventura and Santa Barbara to subsidize, to a small amount, it's an honorarium really, shipping companies that would reduce the speed of their ships in this stretch of land stretch of ocean from the channel at Point Conception down to their port of entry, which is usually Long Beach or Los Angeles. And it's money well spent, it turns out. I wished only that the documentary had more information about how reducing the ship speed could also reduce the noise. One sentence is all I heard. Maybe I'm mistaken and I missed something. Please correct me.
It was a lot of information to get in a short amount of time in the documentary, but we actually have a longer version, a slightly longer version that includes some spokespeople from the Navy side that was aired on Discovery. But we do also have a website called sonicsea.org, and you can find out more information.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask you about the one sequence where you guys had the three gentlemen talking about their experience meeting a whale for like the first time. Mm-hmm. I just want to know more about like how you guys planned to create that sequence, as well as like the editing that went into it.
So, early on you were saying that you have to make decisions along the way and prior to creating a documentary. And I knew that we were going to talk to a lot of scientists, and I'm fascinated by scientists, but sometimes they're scientific. They're very a little dry.
Can be dry.
So that was one question that I asked each person that we interviewed. I really wanted to get some emotional sense from them, because people don't do the work like they do unless they love it, right?
Right.
And so I knew that they love these animals, right? So that was decided very early on. Now, the way we cut it together wasn't decided until we got in the edit room. And that was really the work of Christopher Johnson, who came to me and he said, okay, I edited it together, and it was very choppy, and I loved it. So I said, yes, that's the way we'll do it.
I was just wondering, you've mentioned a couple times that the problem is like not seen out of mind. And in the film, it seemed like there was only a couple instances where any of the shipping or oil companies addressed the issue. Was that just because it largely is kind of just ignored by those companies, or was that an editing decision?
No, the shipping community really does want to make a change, and we had a spokesperson from there, Kathy Metcalf, because she understands not only we need to preserve the health of the ocean, but that really for them it's a cost issue, and it's a win-win for them if they go slower or if they change the design of their ships. The oil companies we were unable to get interviews with, but we did try. And the Navy, we have in the Discovery version, or the one that was aired on Discovery, does have that inclusion. So the screening was made prior to those interviews.
I noticed that one of the last sentences in the film is, it's not science, or it's not, I don't want to get it wrong, but it's not about science. And then he says something like, I mean, it is a little bit, but it's not entirely about science. And since it is a very scientific topic, and a lot of the people, like you said, they have PhDs, they study these things. And I noticed that there's a lot of areas where you probably could have let the biologists go on and on and on, but you kept it pretty attainable for someone who doesn't understand the science. And even the anatomy of the animals, there's a few MRI shots and whatnot, but you don't go too far into that. And was it difficult getting those scientists to communicate in that way, or was it something that you decided afterwards to leave out?
Yeah, some of them that go on and on, we had just edited out. But yeah, that's part of the goal, right? To make this accessible to everyone, and so that everyone understands it. I mean, I think if I can't understand it, I can't understand a lot of things. So I think if I can't understand it, then I have to make it in a way that I will understand it. But that scientist, Christopher Clark, who did say that, I think what he was really saying is, we have a lot of science already that proves that this is happening. And there are some people that keep saying, we need more science to prove it. We need more science to prove it. But we have enough. And even if they think it's not enough, it's like you have to look at what's happened, and say to yourself that we want this ocean to be living. We sadly depend on it too. I mean, selfishly, we depend on the ocean. The amount of oxygen we get from it, the food we get from it, and those animals are just so amazing. And when you see one of those whales, it changes you. I don't know if you've ever gone on a whale watching tour, or I'm sure maybe you guys see them out here, but it's quite impressive.
What part of the so given that this is the first time that you've directed a feature film, what part of the process did you love, and which part of the process are you pretty sure you don't want to have to do again? It's a lot like design in the sense that, I think as designers are usually very curious people. And so I think I'm curious, and I love learning about these new facts, or meeting scientists, or, mostly learning along the way. Sure. So I love that part of it. And to be honest, I don't know if there was a part that I didn't love. I probably loved it so much that I'm moving my career maybe more in that direction. Really? So, yeah, I can't think of a bad part.
Thank you for the film, because it was really important and beautifully done. How do you get it more widely distributed to the general public so that, people can really become aware and make a change? Right.
So, as Michael's saying, it was on Discovery. It's going to air in Discovery Canada this month, and it was on Animal Planet. And they're also going to put it in schools. The NRDC is working with the company to organize that. And then I'm not sure about the digital distribution yet. Maybe it will get on Netflix, hopefully, or some Amazon, maybe.
I have a question regarding the interviews. I noticed that maybe about half of them seemed to be still on a tripod, and the other half seemed to be, I don't know if it was handheld, but it wasn't stable. And so I'm wondering if that's a decision you made beforehand going in, if you knew you wanted some interviews to be like that, or if you had 2 cameras on them and you made it after in a decision to portray the character a certain way or get more of a human feel to them. I don't know. Yeah, so that's what I'm kind of wondering about.
That's an awesome question. No one's ever asked me that, and never knew that people noticed that. So some of those interviews were done prior to me getting involved, and those are the ones with the static camera, the locked camera. I wanted to have a little bit more of a handheld feel because I wanted it, again, to feel more intimate, and that was kind of the overall design direction, the creative vision that we created after a few of those interviews had already taken place.
Mm-hmm. Would you, just as a last point, do you have any advice for the young filmmakers that are in the audience of how to one day direct an award-winning documentary?
Well, I think pick a subject that you love, because you live with it for 2 years or more, and persevere, I guess. I mean, I think that's all I really can say. Yeah.
That's a good word to end on, perseverance. Well, listen, thank you so much. Congratulations on a fantastic film.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, audience, for being here.